like a mythical experience for me. Every concert I go to, like a ritual. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I haven't seen them since their fourth album,
Yeah.
and I liked it though. And I like Coloratura, that song,
Yeah.
but that's about it. um, like it just they were more of a rock band. I liked it more when they were doing that style, but yeah, like those are my influences. Um, 80s. I like 70s, late 60s, all the 70s and early 80s music.
Mhm.
Uh, the most production wise and song wise, and just there's a lot of diverse styles and different, drastically different vocal styles and stuff from one band to the next. Um, I like that kind of thing. And I miss it, so I try to bring some of that back. Like my latest album, The Traveler, it has a lot of early 80s Abacab, ELO,
Yeah.
flavor to it. Some
Yeah.
power mixed with prog.
Yeah.
Rundgren.
Do you have like a big vinyl collection, or you have more CDs than vinyl?
I used to have it. It's actually, I have a funny story. So when I was 15, my parents got divorced, sadly. And I moved to New Orleans. I lived in Florida. We moved to New Orleans with my mom. And I lived there for a year or so. And then we moved back, my brother and I, to live with our dad, just to kind of, then I went off to college and did my own thing. But when I moved back to Florida, somehow my record collection just disappeared. And I had all sorts of stuff. I mean, it wasn't huge, but like I spent all of my money on records back then. And I had like, Genesis bootlegs from the Mouth of the Monster and like, Zeppelin stuff and rare imports and things. And so it just didn't show up. So I lost my entire record collection. So eventually, not long after that, CDs came out. And I worked at record stores back then when I was a teenager. So I would get them cheap. And so I just started building a CD collection. So I had no records. And then like 25 years later or something, my mom says, I think I found your records. Yeah, I'm like, so I finally got my record collection back. And then I had it stored in the garage and there was a leak and it rained on it or something. It leaked on it. I'm like, all right, I'm not meant to have records. But the records I do have were given to me relatively recently. First of all, I have Sound of Contact's Dimensionaut, which I actually had to buy. I bought it from Walmart. Bought one of my own albums that I worked on, produced, whatever, co-produced. But I have Duke, I have Dark Side, both of which Alejandro gave me, and maybe a few others. I've got probably 5 LPs. And then someone gave me a record player my brother as a gift. But I got to be honest with you. I have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I love the nostalgia. I love the big art. I love that people care about physical media, even if it's that. However, I don't really like the sound of record pops and all that stuff, from vinyl. I don't like it that it's limited to just 20 minutes a side. I know that people just love their vinyl and everything, but I don't exactly get it. I think and you have to stop and you have to go and flip the side every 20 minutes. I mean, there's a novelty to that, okay, and there's a charm to it that I get. It's kind of fun that you're interactive, you're more like, gonna listen to music. But in my honest opinion, it shouldn't have to be that way. If anything, I feel like the next evolutionary stage after CD is like Blu-ray audio, where it's longer than 80 minutes. It could be in surround. And, you don't have to get up. You can just drift off for over an hour, maybe 2 hours. Like my latest, the Traveler Blu-ray of the studio album, which is the first one I'm going to do all my albums on a Blu-ray with surround, is almost 2 hours of music continuous that you can just listen to. It even doesn't stop. It just kind of flows into each other. And you can't do that with vinyl. So I love it. It's neat. It's physical. It's cool. People to collect them. It's fun to collect. I collect gear. I have equipment. I have, too many things, stuff that I can't do all that as well. Plus, I don't have unlimited money. So I know that like people who collect, it can get expensive if you really want to have like Alejandro's got an amazing collection. I've never seen anything like it, where this rare single and like people pay hundreds of dollars or who knows how much money for this pressing of this and that. I can't afford to do that and buy the keyboards and the stuff to make the music. Yeah. So I leave that to the collectors. A lot of my customers, a lot of people who buy from my Bandcamp, Sonic Elements Bandcamp, have amazing collections like Alejandro, where they just have all sorts of the box sets and all that stuff. I do buy box sets, but I mostly buy them for the modern surround sound versions of the albums and stuff like that, right, as opposed to vinyl pressings and all those kind of things. That's just my perspective on that stuff.
Valid point. I understand. I get it. How many keyboards do you have?
I don't count them.
A lot.
100 maybe. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of them.
But do you use them? All of them? Have you used them? Each one of them in the last 6 months, a year?
A lot of times, if I own a keyboard, if I bought it with the intention of using it. Even Tony Banks I used on my latest album. Yeah. My solo album. But some keyboards end up just in my hands because they were practically given to me. Like even just this past week, somebody offered an upright piano. And it wasn't a brand I knew or whatever, but I heard it and I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And it was free. So in fact, Alejandro helped pick it up in his truck with me. We went down to Miami, and a friend of mine, Hal, is a real estate agent. And somebody was moving, and they had this free piano, and I'm like, all right, I'll take it. Because I don't have it upright. So I think I'll put tax on it. I'll turn it into a honky tonk piano or something, and I'll use it. So I have some broken keyboards, like a Farfisa and a Freeman string machine, and some things that are sitting there, look cool. I can't use them because they're broken. And at some point, like there's some there, it's like, okay, when I have a little bit of money extra and I want a project, I'll get that working. So there's a handful of them that are just sitting there for looks. There's some that were like nostalgic, like my first 3 keyboards that I ever got. The first one was the Radio Shack Moog. The other 2 were Yamahas. I sold it to a friend of mine named Adam Gaynor, who ended up being in the band Matchbox 20. And he was very successful with that. And then years later, I said, oh, yeah, do you still have those keyboards? He's like, yeah, they're in storage. You want them? He just gave them back to me. So I have the first keyboards, but I don't use them much. But they're just there for nostalgia. But yeah, I mean, one of the things, like I said, I mentioned earlier, Tony Banks and Jeff Downs. Now, Tony Banks had a square of keyboards around him, and it looked amazing to me. And that's one of the things that made me want to be a keyboard player to begin with. I was like, that's cool. Wow. It's like an orchestra. But Jeff Downs, when he did Asia in Asia, I think he's in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most keyboards on stage. But each one of them had a purpose back then. Could be a Mellotron, could be a electric grand, could be a clavinet, could be a Hammond or a Rhodes or a Wurlitzer or a Fairlight or Prophet. And so you had everything up there, which was just like, wow, look at all this. And I've owned probably almost everything except for a Fairlight on that stage. Not the exact ones, but the same model. And I have most of them now, Rhodes, Wurlitzer, clavs, all that stuff, because they're distinctly different from each other. Now, I don't always use them. I'd like to use them more. Like, I used the clavinet with Kevin Gilbert. I even used it live, but in the Wurlitzer. But I use the Wurlitzer a lot. I don't use clavinet as much as I'd like to. But I think that, in fact, I often think, I struggle with this, but it's sort of just like, well, if I'm not behind schedule on releasing a pre-ordered album or something that's like, I can't justify going off on some creative tangent when people have paid for an album and they're waiting for it. That's my top priority at the moment right now. It's a beautiful moment because I have nothing on pre-order, nothing anybody's going, where's this album I ordered a year ago or whatever. It's like, it's a tough thing. I'm trying not to do the pre-orders until I have it really close to being done and I have control over it, because I end up becoming beholden to the people. I have, it's the right thing to do. So now that I don't have anything, anybody waiting for anything like that, the ball's in my court. I can do whatever I want. So one of the things I'm going to do is start experimenting more than I usually think I can afford to do. I could take a year if I want I won't, but for my next album, and just play every keyboard, try different things, whatever. It's a little more fun, actually, to be able to just try more things. You can be, it's also, you got to be careful, because it could be like you could get overboard and like not be able to make decisions. Sometimes you need to just do stuff. But, I intend to use more of them, is a long-winded answer to that question. And I can't here.
Yeah, but like a personal question. So I know you have you bought several of the Tony Banks keyboard, and it could be anybody famous. It's so happened that it's Tony Banks, but it's more, obviously it means a lot more to you because it belongs to Tony Banks, or you can buy somebody else's keyboard that is not that famous, and it's probably better, and it sounds better, and the quality of the component much better. But because it was Tony Banks, and Tony Banks became very important part of your life, you needed to have them, or.
Yeah, to some extent, you could say that, because I've owned Prophet 10s before, and it's this giant keyboard synthesizer. It's not very practical. It's really big. It's heavy. It can break. So, in fact, I owned the one that was used on the wall also.
Wow.
Pink Floyd didn't belong to Pink Floyd. I guess it belonged to maybe to Bob Ezrin or someone else, but I bought it in LA. And I sold that, and I had another one probably, and I sold that or traded it or something, thinking I can get that sound without taking up that much space. But then when Tony's was available, I love it anyway. It's my favorite synthesizer, polysynth, the Prophet 5 and Prophet 10 anyway. And I have a Prophet 5 that I'll never sell, a Rev 2. There's different versions too that sound a little different from each other. But, and I thought, well, the Rev 2, that's all I really need. And then I have the new Rev 4 desktop, so I don't need the Prophet 10 now. I can cover those sounds with what I already have. But this particular instrument and the ARP Quadra, I love Abacab. So like I grew up, and that's where I got into them. Duke and Abacab was at the age, and then I went backwards into the Gabriel era, which I love. But, I have a fondness for that, and not just because of the timing of it, but I still to this day love the sound, the analog sound of that time period, late 70s, early 80s, those Prophet 5s and synthesizers like that and keyboards. And so, and also, like I said, watching Turn It On Again video or Abacab and seeing those keyboards was inspiring to me. And so, yeah, I to own those actual keyboards is a rare exception to where I would spend a lot of money, which I did. I had to borrow a lot of money, and I'm in debt just to be able to do it because I'm not rich yet till I win the lottery. Winning, maybe I'll win the lottery, and that's a different story. No, but being, like I said, a musician, I wouldn't say I'm a struggling musician because I'm not, but it's still not a very lucrative business. It's a terrible business, actually, especially these days with Spotify and everything and the royalties. It's tough. You're like, in fact, it's my business is sustained by people who collect, like Alejandro and people like that, who just like will buy the box sets instead of expecting to listen to it for free on a streaming service. So, I'm grateful. But, to be able to own this keyboard setup, the Abacab rig and the Lamb rig is essentially what I have.
Wow.
Piece. It just means so much to me. And so, but it is also useful, and I love the instruments, and I would have them anyway, but maybe I wouldn't have that version of it like the Prophet 10. But the fact that I have Tony's Prophet 10, I'll never sell it. It's just it's like the Holy Grail, to me. It means the history of it at that point is enough for me, and the Mellotron and the RMI, like the Lamb rig. It's just kind of like, it's almost like at a certain point, I mean, I'd love to have all those things. I'd love to have Jimmy Page's double necks SG. I'd love to have all those things. But I'm not a collector, and I don't have like money to burn. So if I had to pick and choose, those things are like, okay, I'll have these. Tony, I'll take care of these and use them. And they're like museum pieces. But maybe someday they'll end up in a museum. But for now, it's like, yeah, these are real instruments. And actually, Tony kept good care of them, took good care of them, so kept them in good shape. So, yeah, they're great. And Tony and his tech, Jeff Collingham, was great. So, like, they're in great condition and totally usable today in music. So they're not just. I mean, there was one thing actually. Ironically, those aren't. Those are usable, but there's one thing I bought that might be usable, might not be. I took a chance on it, and I bought it a little bit more for the novelty, and it's the Emulator 1. One of the very first samplers. It just looks so cool and weird, and it takes real floppy disks, like 5-inch floppy disks. And that's where he did like the mama sounds, da, 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 all those kind of things. And the technology has gone far surpassed it, way to the point where it's just like it can't do that much really. But it just looks so cool, and it's from that era, also the 1983 Mom album. I saw the tour, and that's in that video. It's the actual one. So I afforded myself a little bit of that collection just because it's like, okay, these mean something to me. But otherwise, I don't do that usually. I don't try to, I don't go to auctions. I don't do all that stuff because I'm not trying to collect stuff. It's just, or have bragging rights or any of those kind of things. It's just literally, like I said, the ball's over the plate. I have to knock it over the park. They called me. I was there. It's synchronicity. I said, call me if you sell stuff. I was almost kidding. And they called me before they called anybody and said, what do you think we're thinking? And they sent me their insurance list. And I looked at it, and like even stuff that they weren't selling, I saw the whole thing, and I was just like, okay, I want first dibs on this, not even knowing how I was going to pay for it. I was just like, and I didn't get all of it, but I got like 90% of what I wanted on the list.
Wow.
And they said it was easy. They're like, this guy's crazy, like, we don't want to deal with this. Like, just put it in a container and give it to him, but Jeff said one really nice thing to me. Tony's tech, he said he couldn't imagine a better person for it to go to. And that meant a lot to me because for me also, being a sort of person who wanted to be on stage and also behind the scenes, my heroes aren't just the keyboard players and the musicians and singers and drummers and on stage, but also the engineers like Nick Davis, the producers like Nick Davis, the techs like the crew. Jeff Collingham, I was fascinated about what he did, and it was like, wow, if you're going to be a keyboard player, you need a great tech like Jeff. And so to be friends with him and for him to say that to me, being Tony's tech, that's just a personal thing. For me, it was just kind of like, all right, somehow it's meant to be. I don't know how. I don't know. I don't want to question it. But somehow, even Tony's tech thinks it went to the good home. You know what I mean? So,
of course, yeah. How does it feel to be at the Christmas cottage or the Lamb? Were you crying, or was a special?
No, I wasn't crying.
Being there, no cry, but emotional, or.
Here's the thing. Again, I'm not a collector. I'm not like a super fan in the sense that a fanatic looking for those what's the word, novelties, those things. It's fun, it's cool, but like for instance, like I don't know, that's not my top priority. I went around and we saw it and it was cool, it was neat, it was like going to, you know, like on a tour or a museum or things like that. It was fun, totally fun to me. Like working at the farm, working there in the studio, that meant something to me, as opposed to seeing it and going, hey. Now if I worked at the cottage or did something at Headley Grange or something and recreated the drum sound from the Lamb with Johnny Burns or something, or Nick Davis, that would be like, you know, super to me. But just going to see all that stuff is cool. It's like seeing the Grand Canyon or seeing, you know, it's great, but it's not like, I don't know. I just see it from a musician's perspective as opposed to a fan. I see it as like this place has a sound. This place has, you know, a history, but is, you know, so like when I worked at the farm, I did a bunch of sessions there. I was one of very few people outside of the band who got to work there.
Wow.
It really felt like, okay, this is what it's like to be Genesis, or, you know, to be anybody, you know, to be working on that console with Nick Davis and recording in that drum room. And it's like you could get an inside feeling experience that's priceless of, you could imagine like just sitting around in that room and like, of course they are. There's a piano right over there. There's, you know, the drums sound great. And you just kind of get an understanding of it, as opposed to a kind of just a taste and observation piece. To me, I like that stuff. It's not that I don't like it, but I just don't. It's for me it's superficial. It's fun, it's neat, but it's not meaningful. Like I wouldn't cry, but I could almost cry when I was like sleeping on the couch at the farm. Like I'm notorious for sleeping on couches in studios because I work till I drop, and thinking, this is like where all this music was made, and I'm here using it. I get it. I understand it. This place is inspiring. This place is a cool studio. I don't know. And I feel that way about different studios like Sunset Sound or legendary studios where it's just like, man, the Doors recorded here, or Led Zeppelin or whatever. And it's like, but I am too, you know, like I'm getting a piece of that creative experience. You know what I mean? I don't know, but
I know. No, I know exactly what you mean, right? So on the other hand, right, I'm not a musician like you, so I wouldn't experience being with Nick Davis, and I have seen some pictures that you were there, and I'm a fan, right? So one day being able to go inside, you know, the farm or Christmas cottage. I interviewed Richard McPhail a couple times, and when I told him that I was going there, he would take me to. Of course, his family sold the house a couple times, and I will go be in the living room, you know, of somebody else's house, and then of course the furniture is there, the different room, you know. Richard Fay tell me, okay, in that room on the left, you know, Peter Gabriel was sleeping, and Tony Bank would argue with him, and this and that. That is of course, is priceless for me. That one day I will, man, that was a studio where, you know, the Led Zeppelin guys were hanging out, or this or that. Of course,
yeah,
uh,
all
you
this stuff. If I wasn't a musician,
know,
and maybe it would be different. You know, like to me, the priority for me is the stuff that relates to
yeah,
music creativity and understanding, hearing it and tasting and touching it. But the history of it is just, it's fun. But I you know, I don't obsess over that, honestly. I kind of just blend the two together and try to make it productive, because I mean, I'm not a historian. but there's a historian aspect to what I do sometimes. Like, let's say, recreating this farm stone room as a plugin. There is a story to tell, and I know that story. And I've worked with Hugh Padgham at the farm, and I worked with Nick, and I've talked to both of them. I have like a master class with both of them, and I feel like, okay, but to see, that's what I mean, though. It's kind of like, you know, my priority is knowledge. And so if I'm talking to Hugh, it's not, or Nick, it's not necessarily to know like the gossip or like, well, they argued, or, you know, but more of like, how did they create, or how did this happen, or what did you use on this vocal, that stuff. I mean, that's just my interest. But that, again, different people. You're not a musician. Alejandro's not a musician. I can understand where you're
it's like, or being inside, I don't know, the Abbey Road or Trident Studios, to mention one famous one, or I don't know, go inside, visit Peter Gabriel and see the Real World Studios.
I have the Real World.
Huh?
I would go to Real World, but you know, I have friends who actually work at Real World, and if I went there, I would like to see it, but I'd rather work there. You know what I mean? So that's how I see it. You know.
All right. The Traveler. Talk about the creative process of The Traveler, your inspiration, objective for this wonderful. That's a masterpiece, Dave. I need to tell you, man.
Oh, thank you.
I don't like to kiss people ass, you know. So it's a masterpiece, and I know you did the last box set and high resolution, so forth. That, feel free to elaborate on how long did it take to put that together.
Thank you, by the way. The Traveler,
it's a very good album.
I had difficulties with what to do with material that I had left over from Sound of Contact.
Yeah.
So from the second album that we were going to make, and then we just kind of split up and we split the material, I took all the songs that I was the lead writer on. So even if we were co-writing it, if I brought the idea in, or if I was the main writer, then I was able to take it with the other guys agreeing, and then vice versa. If it was like mainly their song, even if I co-wrote something on it, they would take it and put it on their albums. But I had a lot of material, and then I had a lot of material to go along with it. So I created the project in Continuum for that. And I got Marco Miniman on drums, Nick DiVirgilio, the two of them, depending on the song, Gabriel Agudo from Bad Dreams in Argentina, and close to Chile, and where Alejandro's from, and Letitia Wolf, and of course Matt Dorsey joined us, Randy McStein, John Wesley from Porcupine Tree, also Randy now plays with Porcupine Tree. So really cool band, and to have a home for these songs. But then those were from the second album, songs I had for the second Sound of Contact album. But I also had songs that were originally worked on around the time when we made Dimensionaut. And the album was full, and I hadn't finished writing these, like songs like Another Lifetime and Ghost Ridden Fables, which are the first two songs on The Traveler. And so I had Marco Miniman play on those two because I thought they were going to be in Continuum songs, since I created in Continuum to just be essentially like Sound of Contact-ish style space rock, but that I could actually control it and make sure that it gets done and not be up in the air depending on what the rest of the band wants to do or able to do or whatever. So so it just, I went back and forth, like I must have made about 200 or more song track lists, album track lists, where like it could go this way or it could go that way, it could go this way or it could go that way. And I was like struggling until finally I decided to just be like, okay, like I even recorded versions of the songs with Gabriel singing. I mean, it did almost like an in continuum version of the album, not the full thing, but, and I ended up making a solo album because it was just like, no, this isn't really where in Continuum is going. There is a third in Continuum album, but it's just different. It's a little darker. It's just different. This is lighter. This is just kind of, and it felt like, you know what, this would be a nice trilogy conclusion to New World and Static. Almost kind of like the way the original Star Wars trilogy had like Star Wars, and then Empire Strikes Back is kind of dark, and then Return of the Jedi, it was light, like a happy, ending, triumphant ending. The Traveler sort of musically suggested to me that like it could be that. And so, because I hadn't actually originally intended them to be a trilogy per se, but a lot of people had sort of asked, like, will there be a sequel to New World? And I thought, yeah, in a way, this is like a sequel to New World, but not as directly. Although the expanded special edition version, you start to hear things from New World, but the main album you don't. And I like that. It's sort of like, look, it's standalone if you want it to be standalone, but if you're into prog and you're into going off on a journey and thinking and all these different things thematically, then you listen to the special edition, especially the Blu-ray, where it's continuous for almost 2 hours, and it's surround, and you start to hear bits of Static, bits of New World, and you understand it from the perspective of this character, the Traveler, who travels in time through his mind, sort of with dreams and this kind of like, uh, unexplained, mysterious way of communicating with the past and the future, and witnessing it, and participating in these events, and witnessing it and telling these stories. And but anyway, so I just thought, okay, I have this material, and now I'm going to build around it. And I kind of it was sort of, I was in a Genesis mood, because I bought Tony's keyboards. I went to their last shows, and I was already working on a Genesis tribute album, which we're going to finish this year. A big multi-disc thing with the entire Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, done with an orchestra, and like songs
Really?
from the Collins era. It's a big, huge project with a lot of great people on it. Nat Sylvan's on it, Francis Dunnery, John Mitchell, Steve Rothery from Merlin. This is going to be great. It's a huge celebration of Genesis. But that's covers, and I love doing that. But there's other ways to pay homage to the greats. And so one was, letting some of this, using his keyboards and letting some of the sounds, and letting it be a little bit more blatantly tip of the hat to Genesis in certain spots that you'll know when you hear it. You go, oh my God, it's full on Genesis. I mean, one track's called Nostalgia Trip. It's literally supposed to be like a Genesis concert, but original music, but that reminds you of Genesis, using the ARPs and all that. But and I have no problem being transparent about that, because it's kind of like, look, other bands have done that, Merlin, IQ, Big Train, and people like that. So it's not like it's a problem. But I felt like it fit musically. I'm not doing it just to do it. It was kind of like, well, I already have these Sound of Contact songs, and then I've got these Genesis tunes. Why don't I just put it all together and make it a cohesive album? So that's how I created it. It was just kind of like, yeah, and that's how I usually do most albums. Is kind of like there's a few songs that are the core start of it. Like New World, one of the first songs was Stranded, and that set the tone for the whole album. And so for this album, Another Lifetime and Ghost Written Fables were like the main core. It was like, oh, if that's going to be the album, then here's the rest of the album to go with it, with these songs and that song. So yeah, that's how it came together. And then of course, for me, it's sort of like I look at and I love it. I love every aspect of music creation, from the songwriting, the music writing, the lyric writing, the production, the playing, the casting, who's going to play what, and all that, the engineering, the mastering. So the process for me a lot of times is it's building blocks, probably a philosophy that I have in life that I mentioned earlier hours ago, which is kind of like this. If you were a sculptor and you weren't necessarily sure what you were going to sculpt, but you had clay, and you said, all right, let me take the clay and just go. And you look at it and you go, wait a minute, I think I see a face. Yeah, I do see a face. Let me chisel away. Oh, it's a face. Oh, it's two faces. No, that's two. It's two faces. Chisel away. So one thing leads to the next, and it tells you what, like artistically, what to do next, inspires you for the next thing. So I usually have, like, let's say, some songs that came from wherever, jamming or, playing around or just hearing something. And then you have it in whatever state it's in. And then your job is, it's like the clay. It's like a face maybe. And you go, what album does that want to be? What fits with that? What are we talking about? We're talking about a bookend thing where it starts with that and it ends with that. Is it the intro? And then all of a sudden you go off into sad and happy and all these different things. But you're only making the album, I find most of the time, because you have that material. If I didn't, I've never, I don't think I've ever, I wouldn't mind, but I've never just sat down and said, okay, let's make an album. It's never just like starting from scratch with zero ideas. It's always, let's make an album because we have these songs and they would be good on an album. You know what I mean? So that's how the Traveler was made, is because I had these songs left over from Dimensionaut that were never finished. And I'm like, I feel like it's my responsibility as a songwriter to finish them, put them out there. They're good songs. So I have other songs like that. Not all from Sound Contact. I've almost, not quite, exhausted all of my material that I had previously earmarked for Sound Contact, but I have other songs that I've written over decades that are waiting to be given that same treatment, love and attention and crafting.
You just mentioned a couple minutes ago the tribute, the Genesis stuff that you will be doing with Nat Sylvan and all those guys. When are you working on that or no? Not yet, or it's an idea for this year?
But we're working on it.
Yeah.
Does the song with Nat Sylvan's already done. In fact, the song with Nat Sylvan is the song that got him the gig with Steve Hackett.
Really?
That story, it's a long story, but the short version is I've been working on this since 2011, 12 years.
Yeah.
And so the Lamb, I was trying out different singers, and originally I was going to do the Lamb where like different singers were singing the songs. And then Francis Dunnery from It Bites and kind of convinced me, said, nah, he said, you got to have one singer be Rail. And I'm like, and he just wanted to do it. And I'm like, all right, he's so good. So I had, like Billy Sherwood sing the Lamb title track. And so I have two versions of it. So I'll release that separately. And I have Nad Sylvan doing Chamber of 32 Doors. And I had to tell Nad at the time that I was like, I think we're going to go with one singer, and Nad uses my software, and I knew Nad before he was with Steve, and he was not thrilled that I made that choice, but I said it in a nice way, but he was disappointed, I remember. And then, but he had this track of Chamber of 32 Doors with an orchestra, and he had it sitting there. It was great. It was meant to be. He played it for Steve. Steve loved it. And then when I went to see Steve with Alejandro and some other friends locally around that time, he said, why don't you, I took my friends backstage and they were all thrilled and everything. And then there was backstage to the backstage, like his dressing room. He said, why don't you come back and just you and me, let's have a chat. And so he knew at the time, this was 2014, that I was kind of out of Sound Contact. And he's sitting there telling me the story that we all know about him being out of Genesis. It's like a father, son, or big brother talk, and he's going, you gotta stick with what you're gonna do, because it's tough and confident. And he's giving me a pep talk. And I'm like, this is crazy. But the other thing he said, he's like, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Nad played me Chamber of 32 Doors that he did with you, and that's how he got the gig. I said, oh, I know, I didn't know it because you didn't tell me. And he said, also, because we liked the orchestra, which really was Nick DiVirgilio and Mark Hornsby's idea anyway to begin with, but that's why we did stuff with an orchestra as well, and Genesis Revisited too. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that either. He said, yeah. So, listen, if you want any guitar in your album, let me know. And that's when, like he was, because he's a great guy, but he's like returning the favor. And of course, to me, it was like, no, it was a favor to do anything to help you, Steve. but he was just, that's the kind of person he is. So that's how he ended up playing on Stranded, which was the first thing we did together. We worked on a bunch of stuff, like 7 other times or more, but that was the first one. And it was because of that. But anyway, so years later, Nad's been with them, very successful. I'm really happy for all of them. They're a great band. I love that whole band. I know the guy, Roger King is a good guy. I said, and I'm working with Fernando Perdomo. We did a Yes tribute together where we mixed guys from Yes with all sorts of different musicians, Robert Barry, and, tons of people, to do a 50th anniversary Yes tribute. So in addition to The Lamb, which I'm producing on my own, I'm doing a sort of retrospective, like a 50th anniversary, sort of like a from the very first album up to, let's say, Genesis, I think, as far as we went. And we got all sorts of different people on it. And at that point, I'm like, okay, so we've got The Lamb, but what about the Lamb tracks that I did with Randy McStein and Billy Sherwood and Nad Sylvan? And so we have a home now. So I said to Nad, I said, can we use the chamber? Would that be okay? Because I found a way to do it where it makes sense. It's out of The Lamb and it's on its own. And he said, yeah, sure, you can use it. It was sort of like, you know what, I forgive you for not wanting to use it back then because I played with Steve Hackett for years, so I'm good. Like you. But the fact that I told him, I apologized. And I said, look, I'm sorry. It just was like, conceptually this idea, but we're doing both now. And so if we're going to do both, it'd be great to have you. And he said, yeah, absolutely. So we have him, we have John Mitchell sings I Know What I Like. Sounds great. Like all this stuff is just really, which I shared on the Patreon. I don't know if you're there's different levels. I did share the little clip of the John Mitchell one. Yeah, it's for people who really love Genesis. And obviously, with tributes, I know you're never going to beat the original. Usually, sometimes some people think you do, but I don't. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as like, it's an alternate. It's a little bit of a novelty and a gimmick, but it's a celebration of the music, celebration of the songs, celebration of the sounds sometimes too. Like sometimes it sounds very authentic. I actually like to do that. I like to work with people who really get it, like Nick DiVirgilio or Nick Collins or, Simon. When I worked with Simon, he's not on it, but like, who really can kind of like get the feel of Phil and stuff like that, as opposed to somebody who's playing it kind of but they don't get it. And it's just like, nah, I don't need to hear this. I don't want to hear this not feeling good. Maybe we'll hear, it's like you have to pick and choose what's going to be different. Because if it's a carbon copy, then it's sort of like, what's the point? But if you're like, well, no, this version has an orchestra, or this version is longer, or like you have to add something to it. But I think the key, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, it's so subjective, that it's all about what you choose to add new and what you choose to keep faithful. And sometimes it's really cool. And sometimes it's like, yeah, it's neat, something else to listen to, but it's a tribute, it's a cover. It's not like, that's why I like to mostly write original music, because then it's definitely new. But it's fun to do. And it's a good exercise. It's also a good, excuse to work with a wider variety of people, because you never know if that could turn into something. Like, for instance, and I'm saying it first right here, not that it matters, but maybe to some people. So I think I Know What I Like was the first time I worked with John Mitchell from Lonely Robot and Frost, and he loved it. He was like, man, got anything else? And so I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll do something with him from the Phil Collins era. But just today, I think it was today, I invited him to be a guest on the new Continuum album. And he said, yeah. And again, it's because it was like, we worked together and we were like, this sounds good. This is a good combo. We kind of have the same we liked the same things, and I liked what he did, so, and that's how that stuff happens. So I like, it's kind of like a playground. The tribute albums are like a way to just sort of like, with no pressure. We're just working on a song together, and we're celebrating something we love here. So easy. There's no ego. There's no money in it. We're just doing it for the love of it. But then we get a sense of like, oh, okay, this person's fun to work with, or this person's easy, or this, they like what we do, myself and Fernando or whatever. And it just kind of it kind of maybe is a starting point for other things, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a one-off fun thing. Like for instance, I love Simon Phillips. I love drummers, great drummers. I love Simon Phillips. And
Yeah.
I figure you do. And I only recently met him, but there was a song on New World, my first solo album, that Nick DiVirgilio, who was the drummer on most of it, didn't have time to do, and I had to finish it. And it was called Crossing of Fates, with Keith Emerson already on it. And it was kind of a tribute to Keith Emerson, actually, or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and in some ways, and a friend of mine, Eric Norlander, worked with Simon, and I said, can you introduce me, or can you, what do I do? He said, just contact him and tell him, me, and I told you. So I did. And, it didn't hurt that I said, do you want to play on this song with Keith Emerson and Billy Sherwood? And he's like, no, okay, all right, fine. Didn't know me, he liked the song, sent it back. Amazing drum track, just like Simon Phillips, just, he's so great. And I don't know if I'll work with him again. I mean, I could ask, but I'm not going to ask just to do it. I'm not collecting those things. It's just kind of like, I needed a great drummer. I love him, and I thought he'd be great. And it turns out he was. And if there was ever that situation again, I would ask, but I may never do it. But at least I had this awesome experience working with someone outside of my prog family that I normally work with, who are also already some of the best, like Marco or a new addition, but Nick DiVirgilio, who I've worked with since The Lamb in '94 with Kevin and Thud. But like Simon, even Nick was impressed, because when I sent him the album, he's like, is this Simon Phillips? It's like, so you couldn't get me, so you got Simon Phillips? Because he loves Simon Phillips. And I'm like, yeah, like, it just, like, that's what we're talking about here. But just a great one-off experience. Or working with Robert Berry. I may never work with Robert Berry again, but he did Changes, and I was like, all right, I got to work with Robert. And I've known him for years, and it's cool. I knew he'd do a great job at that. So, or Jeff Downs, I got to play, and he's a fellow keyboard player, but we did Machine Messiah with him. And I got to play keyboards with him on Machine Messiah, from Drama. I love Drama. So, some of those are just like bucket list items of like, wouldn't it be great to work with, I'd love to work with Roger Hodgson, David Gilmour, if there's the opportunity, if it comes up where they can. If not, it's totally fine. But I have those little wish lists and stuff, like if there is a chance to do it. And I think tribute albums are a great, easy way to just say, yeah, we'll work on this song. It's nobody's song, it's someone else's song, or or it's their song, and we're just honoring it.
Yeah, Simon is an unbelievable. I need new adjective to describe the guy. It's unbelievable. From Pat Metheny era, Antonio Sanchez was pretty good, and Paul Huertico was pretty good.
Oh yeah, they're great. They're pretty good there.
Are you aware of the band called Genetics from Argentina? You like them? They're very, very good, man.
Yeah, they're great. We're working on touring together.
Really? Are you serious?
Yeah, working on it.
All right. When likely to happen or unlikely, or we don't know, 50-50?
We'll wait to see on some details, and if everything goes through, we'll be announcing it soon. If not, then eventually we want to do it. Basically, I mean, this is unofficial news, but a combination of me guesting with them, just because I love Genesis, and I don't play in a tribute band, but I'll guest with one. Why not? That'd be fun. And doing like one of the things that I want to do, just to try things is I'm a big believer in that we need new music. The world needs new music of this style. If you like this style, we can't only listen to tribute albums and go to tribute shows. I mean, it's great, but the thing is that unfortunately, when you spend a lot of money to tour and you play concerts and you go to places where you don't have radio support necessarily, you don't have big muscle marketing behind you and everything, people are familiar with Pink Floyd or Genesis or, and they're not familiar with Dave Kerzner necessarily. Pockets of people all over the world are, thousands of people, but not thousands of people in every city that go, oh, Dave Kerzner, you're going to go see that. They don't know. They might like it if they heard it, but they don't necessarily know, but they'll know Genesis because Genesis has millions of fans over decades and Pink Floyd even more. So that's why those bands are able to just pack the house. And it's like, well, I could pack the house too if I played that music. We did it the way we did it with Kevin Gilbert. It's not that we couldn't do it, but I'm trying to do something else, which is to bring new music to the world, which we need. So the thought is, what if we combine a show with original music and classics you're going to love? Now, so there's different ways to do that. We could do it ourselves. Let's say if I have this group that we call the All-Star Prog Band, where I have somebody from Pink Floyd, somebody from Yes, somebody from, and we all, and the idea is we play some original music and then we do some classics. We could tour just as that and try that angle. That's one thing. But the other is to team up with like a Brit Floyd maybe, or Genetics or Musical Box or whoever. We opened for the Musical Box once, actually. It was a small thing or whatever, but it wasn't bad because the people who go to see Musical Box probably would like my music. And I'm sure there was, and we opened for Marillion. That was a big one.
Wow.
Sound. And that was just like, we got thousands of fans instantly. It was just like, oh yeah, we like this too, of course. So I think doing those kind of double bills or opening for a band that's similar in style, I don't care if it's a tribute band or if it's the actual band or whatever it is. I want to turn people on to new music. And then, if it just so happened, like in the case of a Genesis tribute band, I love Genesis. So like, I'm happy to go play with them and have a little bit of that fun like we did with the Lamb. It's just not a full-time thing for me to do tribute stuff, but like to dip in and, even like with the Cruise to the Edge, which we play sometimes, we play almost every year, but we sometimes do a pre-cruise party. And for that, I'll get a bunch of musicians together and we'll do like, we did Pink Floyd with Harry Waters, Roger's son, and, Steve Rothery joining us and John and Billy from Yes. And just a whole bunch of people all just playing Pink Floyd music. And even like Adrian Belew came up to me after. He's like, hey, that was really good. I liked that. All right. See, this is fun. And it was a lot of work for one show, but that to me is a way to kind of have your cake and eat it too, in the sense it's like, all right, my main priority is writing music, but I'll produce tribute albums and I'll play one-off tribute shows or guests with a tribute band just to kind of have some fun celebrating music I love and other people love, and without losing sight of the main goal, which is like, man, we need new music. We can't just, and we need new music that has some of the qualities that we like about those bands, whether it's melodic music, the melodic keyboard solos. One of the great things we were talking about Pat Metheny for jazz is Pat and Lyle are some rare soloists in the jazz world where you can sing along to what they're playing sometimes. I mean, that's, it's melodic, really super melodic. Yeah. As opposed to, let's say, Alan Holdsworth, who was a genius and sometimes was very melodic, but a lot of times it was just like over your head, like you can't sing to it, you can't even look at it. Don't even look at it. It'd be like it's in another universe of geniusness, but like a little bit like heavy to comprehend or take in for like hours. But Pat Metheny, you could just, I mean, every time I've seen Pat Metheny, it's just been like blown away of just amazing, magic. And anyway, so whatever it is, it's that you like about Pat Metheny or Genesis or Pink Floyd, those things are rare to come out new. And those bands themselves, I mean, Metheny still puts out albums. Lyle Mays is sadly gone. Genesis is done. Pink Floyd is pretty much done. You know, so it's like, all right, well, we've got their catalog to listen to. You know, we've got interpretations of the catalog to listen to and live tribute shows. But where's the new music that gives me some of that feeling of that I get from it emotionally, or the journey, you know, or the headphone experience of like, whoa, man, or surround sound. I mean, there's even things that you can do, which I will be doing specifically for Atmos, for surround sound formats that didn't exist before. So they didn't think of that. They can retrofit Dark Side of the Moon to Atmos now and stuff, but you could actually like record an album with it in mind, which I can do now. So I feel like that's my job. It's like, well, I'm a modern day warrior. I'm a modern, you know, artist who's not done like them. And so that's, you know, somebody's got to do it. So I'm not the only one, but I feel like that's my contribution, is to give people something to listen to on headphones and Atmos and stuff.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. The last question, Dave. 3 hours now. Where, feel free to mention your website, Bandcamp, where people can buy your music, what is coming up for you. You feel free to mention everything.
Google it, but you know, DaveKerzner.com.
Yep.
Kerzner. Sonic Elements is the name of my label for Bandcamp, and it's sort of like a mix of both the tribute stuff, a little mix of everything. SonicElements.bandcamp.com. That's the main shop. Some stuff like Arc of Life, Sound of Contact are on labels, so they're elsewhere. I haven't done this yet, but I need to put a full discography at least on my website so that people can kind of like, if they're really into it, the family tree of where everything, you know, leads, if they're into like let's say, for instance, Arc of Life is mostly Yes with me on keyboards, like a side project. The younger guys from Yes, John Davison, Billy Sherwood, Jay Shellen, who was just now made an official member, and Jimmy Hahn, who played on Union. I'm the only one who actually didn't play with Yes, but I'm on keys, and we have 2 albums out on Frontiers. Sound of Contact is on Inside Out. But the rest of what I've done, most apart from Kevin Gilbert and stuff back in the day, but is on my Bandcamp. So you can find it there. You can also follow me on Facebook. You know, I think it's Dave Squids Kerzner. We didn't even get to Squids, but that's my nickname, Dave Squids Kerzner, Facebook, or David Kerzner is my personal page. Yeah. But and Instagram is Dave Kerzner, YouTube Dave Kerzner. You can't miss. If you put in Dave Kerzner, you're gonna get more stuff than you ever wanted to see.
Well, I'm quite sure that down the road, when you have time, we'll do a part 2. It's a lot of things that
another 3 hour. We're gonna do like
I need to break this down. And people complain, well, friendly way complain that the interviews are long because some people talk to 2 hours, but what can I do? It's important stuff. I mean, if I want to get a hold of, I don't know, Pat Metheny, definitely want to talk to him 2 hours because I will have 100 questions, you know? So what I need to do, break it into, you know, these 3 hours into part 1 hour, part 2, 1 hour, part 3, because people will not have the time to do 3 hours or something. Yeah.
I don't think it would.
It was very nice talking to you, Dave. We'll get together very soon with Alejandro in Miami, and we'll have to go out to dinner and listen to some music, see some shows or whatever, man. And let me know if you you know, ever around here, DC, Virginia area, you know.
If the tour goes through, we'll be up that area.
Yeah.
We'll invite you over to a show, and you're gonna love it. If we do what we're planning to do, it's right up your alley, and you're just gonna and maybe you can help spread the word.
Because I was talking, I knew a little bit I knew, but you didn't know I knew. So
I figured
because
out how-
I interviewed Genetics a couple times. They're, you know, they should be playing here in the United States. They're wasting their time than they're in Argentina. They're very good.
I agree. It'd be great if they played up here. They're a fantastic band.
Oh, of course, you know. So.
Fingers crossed that we're able to do this tour. It would be in June. That's what we're working on, and it's up in your area, kind of like East Coast. So starting in Florida and then working our way up.
Going up, yeah. And I would like to put a little bit of money and a sponsor there and put a logo from the radio or a logo from the YouTube
Great.
channel. I'm happy to help out, man. Whatever, any way I can.
Let's hope it all happens, all the visas and all the details and everything, and once we get the official word, we'll be talking all about it, because June is not that long from now. It's coming up.
That's right. Very nice talking to you, Dave. Have a great night, man. Appreciate it.
Bye.